We've got new details on Matthew Stafford's new deal with the Rams, and what does it mean for Cooper Kupp? Could Kupp be back, or will they be in a position where they have to release Cooper Kupp? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do me a huge favor, join the party, subscribe to the fastest growing Rams YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. Cover LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, Bleacher Report, Dodgers Nation, do some NFL radio for Westwood One. And of course, I'm always joined by the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, the pre, half, and post-game show host for your Los Angeles Rams. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, more details on Matthew Stafford's new deal with the Rams. What does this mean for Cooper Kupp? Any chance that Kupp comes back now? Well, you're going to be disappointed if that's your hope. Also, the Rams bring back Alaric Jackson. But first, today's episode of Locked On Rams brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, Travis, so Friday was just reacting, okay? Hey, he's coming back. We didn't know much about the deal, if it was more years or what it was. Well, we knew that Stafford needed more guaranteed money. Well, according to Albert Breer of SI, the Rams gave Stafford a significant raise in 2025 and didn't add any new years to his contract. Stafford's current deal was set to pay him $27 million this year, so he'll get a sizable increase from that. And during the negotiations, there was some talk, some reports that the Rams, they wanted to go year to year, while Matthew Stafford, his big sticking point was wanting more guarantees beyond the 2025 season. So I think the most interesting thing moving forward is what kind of guaranteed money does it look like in 2026? He's set to make just $31 million next year, so I'm sure he's going to get a bump. But look, all that stuff's worked out. He's back, and you're not seeing more years to that deal.
Yeah, it's funny, and obviously the amount of money that they pay him is important, not just to him and not just to the Rams, but how much money that allows them to spend on other players and in other positions and round out the roster and all this stuff obviously is important. So keep that in mind with what I'm about to say. I don't care. Right, that he's here. He gives them their best chance to win next season. I would argue that he gives them their best chance to win probably the season after that. And I think that's probably the time where you start thinking about going in a different direction. Obviously he got what he wants. Obviously the Rams got something that they can live with. So, when we get the details of these things as they start to come out, I'm sure that we'll see, exactly what these things are. But at the end of all of this, the Rams have a top 10 quarterback, maybe something better than that. They got their guy that understands what Sean McVay wants to get done. They understand somebody that the city, the culture of the team, all of these things. You're not breaking in a new guy at all. It is a win, 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 win right on down the line. Now, look, if he gets hurt, if he has a precipitous drop-off, which I don't think is likely, that's just not the sort of player that he is, then, maybe this is something that you look back in a year and a half, 12 months, 18 months from now, and what did they actually do? But as we sit here on March 3rd watching this, I think this is a good sign, a good deal, and the Rams are moving forward with one of the better quarterbacks in the league. So if they had to overpay a little bit to do it or do something that guarantee another year that maybe they would rather not have, I think that's going to be all right.
Yeah, exactly what you said. I think this is a win-win. It's a win for the Rams. It's a win for Matthew Stafford. I mean, he was set to make $27 million this year. He's going to more than double that most likely when it comes out, when the actual figures come out. Most people, they don't care about that stuff, right? Nerds like me, I care, but like most people are like, hey, we just got our guy back, and that's the most important thing. But I think the biggest takeaway in all this is, look, weeks ago, there was some talk that maybe would take them ripping up a deal and give him a 3-year extension and maybe looking at a 3-year deal, $150 million, something crazy like that. Well, they're staying within the same years of the original deal. They're just giving him more money. So I think this works out for both teams. It kind of protects them from the age factor and the injury factor, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and keep in mind, and while the Rams clearly wanted to have him back, and he is the best man for the job, all of that is clearly, obviously true. The Rams were not going to do something crazy. So I think that when the details of this does come out, I think we'll get a pretty good idea of what crazy was and what they would or would not do, because you look around and they don't have a ton of bad deals on this. And I can't imagine that this is the day that they decided to start making a bunch of bad deals. Did they need to pay him what he's worth? Absolutely, because he's that good of a player. But I don't think that they've painted themselves in a corner with this. We'll see. We'll see as the details come out. Maybe it'll be one of those things like, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. This is stuff they almost never do. But I would be very surprised at that. They got their man, and that's great news.
Yeah, and a little bit of the fallout, too, from this interesting thing to me is what kind of compensation package would the Raiders have given up? Yeah. And now there's been reports that the offer would have included a second-round pick in this year's draft and a 2026 first-rounder, that would have gotten a deal done potentially for the Rams, but also says that the Raiders were kind of kicking around the idea of including that sixth pick in this year's draft, and that if that was the case on the Rams end, it might look a little different. So that was a little carrot that was kind of being dangled that they might have kind of gone for, because that would have been pretty enticing.
Oh, yeah. Heck, look, if you're talking about the sixth pick in the draft, the Giants had the third pick in the draft. If those are the sorts of things that are getting knocked around, then that's a different, situation entirely. That's something that you have to reconsider. Now, I'll just throw this out there too. And I'm not, a draft expert, right? Knowing every player that's coming out of this, but from everything that I have read, everything I understand, this is not the draft that you want a super high pick in. This is not the one that, hey, look, you got 10 guys that are guaranteed to be this, that, and the next thing. This is a draft that is a little more speculative. So even if those were in play, I don't know if it's an automatic yes. You don't think twice about it. But I do think that matters a little bit. They had those first round picks because, a guy today is better than a guy tomorrow usually. But that those picks were unavailable, I think made this an easier decision for the Rams.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that especially with how well they've done in the draft in recent years, and you could have taken that pick, got more picks, you could push them into 2026 when there's more quarterback options that look like better, ideal franchise type quarterbacks. But still, I mean, the Rams are so hot in the draft, you're like, okay, man, if they get those picks, what do they do with them? But now the big question is, what's next for the Rams? I mean, the two biggest priorities this offseason, it was what you do at the quarterback position. It was get back Matthew Stafford. That was number one priority. And the second was solidifying the offensive tackle position. And the Rams were able to get a deal done with Alaric Jackson. They're compensating him as really the 9th or 10th. I mean, something in that range, highest paid left tackle in the sport. And I love the move. I think the odds of getting a left tackle later in the draft, especially it's going to contribute early on, are unlikely. The odds of finding one this year's free agency, I mean, we saw last year they went out and they got a guard in Jonah Jackson, and that was just an absolute whiff. They've already allowed him the option to go seek a trade. So, yeah, I love the bringing back of Alaric Jackson. He's not elite, but he is an average to an above average left tackle in the National Football League at the second most important position. That's really saying something.
Yeah, you've heard me say this a lot. The everydayers have heard me say this a lot. I use this word as a compliment. This is not meant to be anything other than extremely complimentary. He is competent at his position. That is what you're looking for in the NFL. Can he do the job more often than not? And the answer with Alaric Jackson is absolutely yes, he can. Is he the second coming of Trent Williams? No. So what? He's good enough. And he's one of those guys that they were able to get by on the cheap for a couple of years because they drafted him or undrafted and developed him and turned him into a starting left tackle in the NFL. That is a massive accomplishment for the team. That is a massive accomplishment for Jackson himself. He deserves the money. And, lastly, Doug, is you don't spend that money on a quarterback, and quite frankly, an older quarterback, to leave his blind side vulnerable. You needed to take care of this. This was the second that Stafford got done. You knew that this was just a moment or two away, that they were going to go and take care of him, because the Rams offensive line may not be a group that gets a nickname or the thing that we talk about first when we talk about this Rams team. But by the time we got to the end of the season last year, the offensive line was a pretty effective unit. And you talk about the pass rush of the Philadelphia Eagles or some of these other teams that they played, and they did a good job of keeping Matthew Stafford relatively safe. And obviously that's something that's the number one priority moving forward. You don't pay your quarterback and then go cheap on the offensive line.
Exactly. And I'll let you mention, too, we were talking about getting guys late in the draft as left tackle. He's a UDFA in 2021, and he becomes a starting left tackle for 2 years. Then he gets himself a $57 million extension with $35 million in guarantees. And look, he gave up just 3 sacks and 502 pass blocking snaps. So, yeah, no, he's been a rock, and I agree with you. You got to bring him back, and there's a no-brainer. And I love the move. But coming up next, big question. We know what this move meant for Alaric Jackson. Move you had to make, but what does this mean for Cooper Kupp? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than, the answer to this, FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you're watching a little Laker basketball last night, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your bets into a same game parlay, right? Love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Even if your team's kind of got it locked down or you got that team in a late game comeback, whatever it may be, picking a player to hit that clutch 3, you never feel like you're out. You never feel like you've missed your chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid like that instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also want to send a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. Continue to help the channel grow, the podcast grow, and this is the perfect time to join the Everyday Listeners Club. You got free agency, you got the draft coming up. If you're new to the show, we've got a lot of new listeners and people on YouTube, so join that Everyday Listeners Club, then you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. All right, Travis, so here in our second segment, got to talk some Cooper Kupp because there was some talk that Cooper Kupp could have followed Matthew Stafford to the Raiders or could have followed him to the Giants. Well, that's not going to be the case by all reports with Stafford continuing his career with the Rams. It won't be with Cooper Kupp. Albert Bree reported, quote, "For what it's worth, I'm hearing Stafford's return doesn't change anything with Cooper Kupp, who may have gone with the quarterback to New York or Vegas had he been traded." So if you were a Rams fan hoping that, hey, we're getting the band back together, the boys are back in town, that Cooper Kupp was going to be a part of this team moving forward just because Matthew Stafford was continuing his career. We saw what they did in Super Bowl 56 and the connection, the 9 and dime. It's just going to be the Dime podcast from now on. It's not going to be the 9 and dime. It's going to be just the 9 podcast, not the 9 and dime. So unfortunately for Cooper Kupp, it does appear that his career with the Rams is going to be coming to an end pretty soon here.
I think that's the most likely outcome. I agree with you, but I don't think it's 100%. I think it's probably somewhere in the 80s. I think it's like, because here's what could happen, that you see Deebo Samuel goes for a 5th round pick, I believe it was. And this is the price for wide receivers that have been in the league for a while. And if the Rams can't find something that makes sense for them and he can't find a place that makes sense for him, then maybe coming back at a significantly different number is a possibility. This isn't quite like Matthew Stafford. It's kind of sort of similar, but Matthew Stafford has made over $300 million in his career. And I'm sure that, winning is the number one priority on his bingo card and trying to find a way to make one more run at it. And I'm not saying that winning isn't important to Cooper Kupp. I believe that it is. He's one of those guys, but he hasn't made the kind of money that Matthew Stafford is. So if there's an opportunity for him him to go somewhere, to catch some passes, to get some numbers, to make some money, to maybe get one more deal, then I can understand why he'd want to do that. If you're being selfish as a Rams fan and you just want to keep one of your favorite players around, what you hope is that the market for him around the league is soft. What you hope is there really isn't something or somebody that he looks at and says, okay, I can go there and really make an impact. I might as well stay where I'm familiar, stay where I can do what I can do. And there's an opportunity there. But I tend to agree with you, Doug, that I would be more surprised that he's here than if he's not, but I won't completely lock the door on him coming back. I think there is a slim path to him returning.
I think it's a slim path. I think that, look, I mean, if you're a Rams fan, you don't love Cooper Kupp, you're not a Rams fan, right? I mean, right. Cooper Kupp has really kind of been one of the heart and souls of this franchise since they moved back to Los Angeles. But the truth of the matter is he hasn't played a full season.
I don't mean to cut you off, but could you make the case that he is the guy since they've come back to LA? Because as good as Matthew Stafford has been, and he played somewhere else for 10 years. You know, I still think for a lot of football fans, when you think of Matthew Stafford, you think of a Detroit Lion Matthew Stafford. Aaron Donald, even though he's walking straight into the Hall of Fame, played a piece of his career in St. Louis, and he was a defensive player. And as great of a player as he is, he didn't have this giant personality where you're constantly paying attention to him. Cooper Kupp, drafted by the Los Angeles Rams, played with Sean McVay his entire career, Super Bowl MVP, Triple Crown winning season, fan favorite. Like, you go around the SoFi Stadium, there's a ton of Kupp jerseys. I'm not sure he isn't the guy when we're talking about this era of Rams football. I'm not saying that he was the best player. He might have been, but I'm saying that he was the most important, most impactful, most popular player of this era of Los Angeles Rams football because he spent his entire career in that uniform.
Yeah, absolutely. You could make the case he was the most beloved. No doubt about it. I mean, I think Todd Gurley, if things didn't go wrong with the knee, he would have been the guy. Yeah. But as far as just that fan favorite, the Cooper Kupp chants, I mean, Coop and all that stuff that you heard. I mean, yes, certainly he was that guy. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Aaron Donald was the best player. He's pretty much the best player in Rams history, for being completely honest here. Sure. I mean, for me, my guy is still Aaron Donald. But I think for the fan base, as far as just, look, Kike Hernandez is not a Hall of Fame player, right? But he's like more popular than most All-Stars, right? There's something about certain players, certain guys that just endear themselves to the fan base that you just can't deny that bond they have. And Cooper Kupp 100% is that guy. I think that what this Rams organization has shown us is that even with a player like that, a guy that single-handedly put together one of the best seasons we've ever seen from a receiver, they would not have won the Super Bowl in 2021 without him. Even with that, they're willing to separate the emotions from that to make a difficult decision. And I think it comes down to two things. Turning 32 this summer, there's age. And the fact that just the advanced numbers, they just don't point to someone that is a receiver that if you give him opportunities, they feel like, okay, is there another guy we can put in that spot? I think that's kind of what it is. I mean, you could look at the contract, right? I mean, his contract in $20 million. I mean, with the injury history, hasn't played a full season 2021. With the contract, there's that. But there's also the fact that if he's on this team on a reduced contract and he's getting reps alongside Puka Nacua, then you're saying to yourself, well, are we limiting this offense because he's getting those reps, right? I mean, you have Jordan Whittington in there who can do a lot of the things that Cooper Kupp used to do, right? Blocking, physical, strong hands. And yeah, it's a tough situation. It really, really is. But the Rams have to decide, is it what's better for this offense or what's better for Cooper Kupp's legacy with the Rams?
Yeah, it is the thing that is, I would argue, the hardest part of the job. And it is certainly the part that fans have the biggest trouble wrapping their head around. And that is when somebody is as popular as Cooper Kupp and their production starts to decline, when do you decide it's time to move on from him? It's really hard to tell a fan favorite. Look, if we're building statues outside of SoFi Stadium, I'm with you. The first one that gets built is Aaron Donald's. The second one that probably gets built is Sean McVay's, if we're being honest about this. And then, after that, I think, Cooper Kupp is certainly on that list. The fact of the matter is his production has dropped significantly. He is not the player he was when he won the MVP a few years ago. That is just stating the obvious. But because people have such a warm spot for him, because people have such a positive association with him, you don't want to see him go. But this is why Tony Pastors and Les Snead and Sean McVay and Kevin Demoff and all those guys that are making these decisions have to do really hard things. You have to tell a great player, a popular player, we love you, but we can't keep you, and we sure can't keep you at that price, despite the fact that everybody would love to have you. And this is how the team stays good. I'll go back to the team that you and I spend a lot of time talking about, Doug, both here on Locked On Rams and when we just chat among ourselves, is the Dodgers. One of the things that the Dodgers were terrific at for a very long time, and I think they're terrific at it again, is they get out of business a year too early rather than a year too late, right? They get rid of a guy who's got a year left on a pretty good run before a year after a pretty good run has ended. Don't sign up for the bad years of a deal. And I think that's what the Rams are doing with Cooper Kupp. They got the best part out of it, and that's the ugly side of pro sports, is the second they can find somebody to do it cheaper, they will, even if you are an incredibly popular player.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, for lack of a better broadcasting term, it sucks. It just does. It really does. Even though we know this is coming, when I get that update on my phone, I'm going to fall to my knees in the middle of a Chipotle. I really will. Just because, this is Cooper Kupp we're talking about. This is our guy. You wish that he was less injury prone. You wish that from just a performance standpoint, he was close to the guy that we saw in that Triple Crown season. But unfortunately, Matthew Stafford, every time Father Time comes for Matthew Stafford, he punches it in the throat, right? Yeah. But for Cooper Kupp, it's kind of come and it's had its impact.
Most important question: are we doing a bowl or are we doing a burrito at Chipotle?
It depends. Honestly, I still do the bowl. I still do the burrito, man. I still do the burrito just because, the bowl is cool. Everyone's like, "Oh, give me the burrito bowl." You know what you can do? You can actually, if you get a burrito bowl, you can actually ask for a tortilla on the side and it's free.
Yep, I did know that. I was hoping to spring that on you, where you can have the best, because you can load up that bowl. You get a little more in the bowl than you do in the burrito, and then you can kind of do it. No.
For whatever reason, I don't know why. I don't order anything extra, but I never order anything extra. But I just get everything that they have available. Yeah, and it's always too much for the guy, for the girl. Yeah, it's always too much, and it breaks. And they're like, "Do I want a double?" I'm like, I'm already getting the burrito. I'm already making myself feel bad that I got the burrito and not what 90% of people do the bowl. Now you ask me if I want to add another tortilla onto that and make me feel even worse.
Look, I understand that the meat is delicious and the salsas and all that stuff is really good. But if we're really kind of going down to brass tacks, the tortilla is really what we're there for.
Yeah.
It's chewy, it's soft, it's warm.
A good tortilla.
Yeah, it's a very good tortilla. 100%.
I'll tell you my goal in life, Travis. My goal in life is to go into Chipotle, order a burrito, ask for the guacamole, and for them to look up and see me and not have to tell me that I know it's an additional charge. I know I've made in life, yes, when they see me and they're like, "Oh, he knows it's extra." Even if it is, we don't have to tell him. But for some reason, they have to basically mail me a letter, have me sign it, and agree that I'm paying X for the guacamole. I'm offended by that.
That's because there's probably one person somewhere that every time that they don't get told that's an extra $1.50 or whatever it is, they put it on, they wrap it up, and that guy's, "Hey, that burrito's supposed to be $9, not $10.50. Oh, you got guacamole? Well, nobody told me that." And then they're going to try to get the XD. That's how it goes.
No, I think it's a personal thing. I think it's, I work a sweatshirt. I don't know what it is, but coming up next, we're going to talk about what's next for the Rams, and also, could the Rams cut Cooper Kupp? Will they have to release him? There's some talk about that. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis. So, as you mentioned in the last segment, the 49ers, they got a 5th-round pick for Deebo Samuel. He's a couple years younger than Cooper Kupp. He's been a little more productive in the last couple of seasons. Very different receiver, physical type of receiver, almost using him as a running back type plays occasionally. But the point is that there is going to be a market for Cooper Kupp reportedly, but is there enough interest for him for a team to make on a trade and take on his full salary? Because if that's not the case, the Rams might be in a position where they're going to have to cut Cooper Kupp. Now, if they cut Cooper Kupp or release him, of course, they would save $7.52 million in cap space if they cut him before June 1st, or $15 million if they designated him in a post-June 1st cut. And then he'd count $22.26 million in a dead cap hit over the next 2 seasons. So really, that's where they're at with Cooper Kupp right now. It's kind of gotten weird. I don't know if we've even talked about this on the show. Kind of want to actually probably start here on this segment. The kind of the whole social media kind of the post by him and his wife. I mean, it feels like the Rams didn't like kind of putting all their business out there in the social media world about this decision.
Yeah, it's weird. And look, it gets personal even when you don't want it to get personal. It gets personal when someone tells you, hey, look, we love you. We just don't want you to work here anymore. That's really a hard thing to hear. And Cooper Kupp has been the ultimate professional. Cooper Kupp, I think, wherever he goes, whether he goes to another team in the NFL, whether he stays here in Los Angeles with the Rams, will continue to be a pretty darn good football player. Now, will he be what he was a few years ago? I don't think so. I think that guy's probably, in the rearview mirror. It's just father time doing what it does. But it's hard. It's really hard especially when you've only been with one team. Like, look, put it to you this way. If Cooper Kupp goes to his next team and then is on a different team after that, then that transition's pretty easy. You've been through it. You know what it's like. But when you're drafted by a team, you've been as good with the team. Everybody's told you they love you. You look up in the stands and it's nothing but your jersey. And then it's like, yeah, cool, thanks, but we're good. That really lands a certain way. And even a pro like Cooper Kupp, I think, can have it affect your feelings. And so I can understand why the social media stuff has been what it's been. But I'm still, I wouldn't say I'm totally optimistic. I'm at least hopeful that maybe somehow, some way they can find a number that works for everybody. But I'll say this, kind of going back to where you started, Doug. This is a financial play for the Rams. If they can save money, they're going to do it. And the more money they can save, I think the more likely that's the move that they ultimately end up doing, unless they can restructure this thing on something that is really on their terms. And, maybe he wants to stay and doesn't want to go to that next team. Maybe that's important to him. Hopefully so.
Yeah, I think it's a financial play. And I think that there's been a lot of conversations within the Rams in that building. Hey, is Cooper Kupp in this offense make this the best version of the Rams offense? And you look at some of the receivers available. I think this is not a great free agent class, especially from the receiver side. I mean, you look at guys like T. Higgins. I mean, there's reports where it's trending towards the Bengals trying to keep him. Godwin, the same with the Buccaneers. So the only thing I kind of go back to is that the Rams have explored options of upgrading at that position, whether it be trading up for Odunze last year during the draft. They were exploring that. They wanted a Brock Bowers and they wanted Mike Evans. So, I mean, the Rams usually eventually kind of get what they want as far as kind of pulling the trigger on certain things, and they just haven't been able to do that. So I think that has to be a top priority for the Rams, is kind of find a way to upgrade that position, because you essentially are in absolute win now mode in the next 2 years with Matthew Stafford. So that kind of has to be kind of front of mind for them in my mind.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that I'd just add to that, Doug, is that it puts an immense amount of pressure on Puka Nacua. Just an immense amount of pressure on him to not just kind of be what he's been through his first 2 years in the league, which is terrific. He's been a really good player. But now the other guy who's a Super Bowl MVP is no longer there. Now, I know he's been the number one guy for basically all of last season, so he's used to that. But I do think that the dynamic changes a little bit when he's not even in the building anymore. And all that stuff now lands on number 17's shoulders. And I think he's ready for it, but it's a big change.
For sure. Let me ask you a question too. I mean, what makes, will this go down as a messy breakup?
No, I think this goes down as a typical NFL breakup.
Like Isaac Bruce was a Niner. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just, I don't know, man. So few players spend their career in one spot. Like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Joe Montana. I mean, these guys all moved, and these are the best players in the history. I know that there's some John Elways and some other guys that stay in one spot, Dan Marino's, but guys move, man. So Jerry Rice was all over the place at the end of this year. Randy Moss played on different teams. This is just life in the NFL.
It just happens.
Yeah.
For sure. I want to see it back as a coach for the Rams in like 10 years. You know what I mean?
Sure. Look, my radio co-host, DeMarco Farr, says that'll be the biggest thing for them to replace is just his knowledge, his institutional knowledge. Like that's
the thing. I mean, it's tough to put that's on the back of the football card, back of the baseball card, right? I mean, just the intangible element of it. But that's it over this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.